Hi, it's Satya. See me at jensatya.com. A lot of the work that I do is emotional resiliency work, and I help people get in touch with emotional layers of themselves from years of grieving and PTSD and CPTSD. Many of my clients have dealt with abuse and/or chronic illness, loss of loved ones, and chronic stress, and I help them to reclaim themselves and find levels of balance. And I do that through integrative and alternative means. There's a lot of information on my website. I am the founder of a method called Trauma Release Method, where I've trained therapists and practitioners for years in how to help people with this as well. With that background, part of what I see when I look at a situation like we're dealing with the coronavirus is a different layer of what's going on. And I see the development of PTSD and internal states of trauma. And then I also see a deep layer of grief. I'm going to talk more about PTSD and trauma in other videos. And this video, I would like to talk about the deep states of grieving that I'm watching going on around me. First, I believe that we're grieving the loss of our day-to-day lives. All of us have had to make some dramatic changes. And I believe that we are grieving the loss of the structures that we had in place before now that many of us had spent years to create, many years, a lifetime to create a structure that suddenly has gone out of our control. And in doing that, in having those experiences, which do create trauma, when something suddenly happens that's not our fault and that we can't control and don't have a map for. We don't have a way through this, in part because we don't see an end yet, and I'm going to get to that. And when we're grieving the loss of something that we had no control over losing, it's dramatic. And because we're not often naming that emotion, we're not saying, you know what, I just realized I'm grieving. We're saying I'm numb, or I'm sad, or I'm feeling depressed. And I think what we need to do is name the actual emotion, name the grieving. Say, I'm grieving the loss of something. I'm grieving that I used to get up and go to the local coffee shop where I knew everyone, and I'd sit down and have my coffee with people I knew every day. I'm grieving the fact that I would take my kids to school and I would see them so happy with their friends, and it would start my day off great because I knew they were taken care of by good teachers and good people. Or I'm grieving the loss of a specific food that I don't have access to right now. Or I'm grieving the loss of time that I used to have, time alone in my house after my kids went to school, because I need quiet sometimes, and right now everything is loud. I did another video on the quiet that's going on right now, and some people are also grieving the loud. Some people are grieving the fact that they would go to work every day and there were people around. And now if they're alone, they're feeling isolated and they're grieving that change. So we're grieving on a deep level the loss of something. And I think the first step in healing that type of grief is to name it and name what we're grieving and talk to someone about it. So it could be a friend, it could be a loved one, it could be someone like me, it could be your therapist or your counselor or coach or anyone that you usually talk to. And I think it's important to state that. The next level of grieving that I'm seeing is because we are grieving a change in society that we don't see an end for yet. People keep asking me if I would equate this to 9/11, and no, I wouldn't, because 9/11 had an end. It was immediate. It was a change that occurred, and yes, the world changed after that, and at the same time, it was done. And I'm not saying the grieving for it was done. I'm not saying the after effects were done. I'm saying the actual event finished, and then we could deal with it. What's happening right now is it's ongoing. We're not being given an end date. We don't have a plan necessarily for exactly how to take care of this yet. And notice I said yet. And that is creating internal turmoil for a lot of people, because when we grieve something, we're usually grieving something that finished. And so what we're doing now that's very different than the way we usually grieve is we're future pacing our grieving. So we're looking at the future and we're saying, this could happen, and this could happen, and this could happen. And we're grieving things that haven't happened. And we're grieving into the future, which can make us feel much more out of control. Much more out of control than we've felt before. And so I would encourage you, if you find yourself, I call it future pacing your grieving, if you're future grieving like that, I think you need to write down what you're afraid of happening and recognize that staying present in this present moment, that hasn't happened. And one of the things I've learned over the years is most things that my clients have feared in the future never happened, and or happened in different ways that they had many more resources than they realized in the moment they were fearing it. So I would encourage you to write it down and then tell yourself, in this present moment, I am okay. And I have a presence video that I wrote on staying present, and there's a little practice in that video that might be helpful as well. So if you feel like you need help with that, please see that video next. And for right now in this moment, you are okay. And when you're future pacing, you're grieving something that's never happened. Just know how much stress you're putting on yourself, and we need to take more control of our minds. The third aspect of grieving, and I'm going to talk more about this one in future videos, is we're grieving actual loss of people and animals, because animals have been greatly affected by the situation. And one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing right now is, how do we grieve the loss of a loved one when we can't do it the way we usually do? Because usually, if we have the loss of someone, we have a funeral and it's immediate. We have a way to do a ritual and it's immediate. And right now, I'm hearing from clients that they've lost a loved one who's so far away they can't go there. They can't be with family. They can't be with loved ones to grieve together. And they can't hug each other and hold each other and give each other comfort over the loss. It is a traumatic way to grieve right now. And my heart goes out to you if you've had a loss and you're alone with that loss. And even if you have your family around, which is so much more comforting to have others around usually when you're dealing with loss, with everything else going on, grieving the loss of a loved one is not taking the precedent that it usually does. We're not, in many respects, being able to be as present while we're dealing with everything else. And we also can't do the normal funerals. We can't go to the normal places that we would go to set things up. We can't congregate as a group and support someone together. So we're having to find alternative means. I was recently asked by someone, what can I do? I just lost someone and we want to grieve. And so we're putting together a ritual for his loved one to feel like they're honoring them in the moment, knowing that later on they'll do something together. And I do think one thing that we can do if we've had a loss right now is grieve what we can in the moment. Don't put it off, because it's going to feel like it's with you. Don't put it off. If you've had a loss, grieve it now and know that you can grieve it with others more later. And maybe set up a Zoom call or do something. And no, I don't have stock in that company. I just use Zoom a lot for group work right now. And so do something as much together with others as you can, and do something. Because grieving is so important, and it's important not to put it off. It's important to have some level of grieving in the moment that it occurs. Because if you have a loss right now and you try to ignore it with all the other stress going on, you're going to feel that. And if you grieve it right now, and allow the spirit of that individual or the spirit of that animal to just know that you're appreciating them. You're going to feel that connection. And it's going to remind you that even with everything going on, the humanness of our experience right now, we can still hold on to. I hope you found this useful, and I would look forward to hearing any of your comments. And for all of you grieving right now in any level, many blessings. I wish you love, and I hope that you find within yourself the presence to know that you're not alone, and that we're all grieving through this together, and that it will change, and things will come to a place where we can be together again. Many blessings in good health.